Earlier this year, something strange started spreading across TikTok and Facebook. Pages with names you'd never heard of were posting videos with titles like The Heartbreaking Tragedy of Matt Stetar and The Mysterious Disappearance of Diesel Creek. Comments filled up fast. Fans who'd been watching the channel for years started panicking, asking each other what had happened, whether the channel was gone, whether Matt was okay. Then Matt posted on Instagram. He used a quote most people would recognize: "The reports of my death have been greatly," and left the rest hanging. He didn't even need to finish the sentence. He was fine. The channel was fine. The whole thing had been AI-generated clickbait from content farms that had never watched a single video. But the fact that tens of thousands of people believed it, even for a few days, says something about how much this channel actually means to people. Because Diesel Creek isn't just a guy fixing old machines. It's a story most viewers only know the surface of, and the real version is a lot more interesting than anything those fake TikTok pages came up with. So here it is, the actual story of how Matt Stetar got here. He grew up in a small town in western Pennsylvania, right on the edge of the West Virginia border. About 10 minutes from Weirton, WV, depending on which road you took. And from the very beginning, Matt was the odd one out in his own family. His parents hadn't planned on a third kid. By his own admission, he arrived about a decade after his sisters, which he's joked about publicly. He was the youngest by a wide margin, the only son and the only one in the family who ever cared about anything mechanical. His grandfather had been a mechanic. That's often the part people point to when they try to explain where Matt's ability came from. Except there's a problem with that theory. Matt never actually met the man. His grandfather was gone before Matt was old enough to have a single conversation with him. His father had a passing interest in car maintenance, the kind where you change your own oil and maybe swap a belt, but nothing beyond that. His sisters had zero interest in any of it. There was nobody in that house teaching him how engines worked or handing him tools on a Saturday morning. What Matt had instead was a brain that wouldn't leave things alone. As a little kid, he was pulling apart lawnmowers, disassembling toys just to figure out what was inside them, finding broken things and treating them like puzzles. There was no mentor, no trade school pipeline, no family tradition to follow. Just a kid who couldn't stop taking things apart, and the school system around him wasn't exactly built to help with that. Matt attended a Catholic high school in Weirton, across the state line from where he actually lived. And the school was fine academically, college prep courses, decent enough teachers. But for someone like Matt, it was almost useless. He barely graduated. His own words on that from a podcast interview were pretty blunt. He put everything into the subjects that interested him and did the absolute minimum for everything else. He was the kid staring out the window, daydreaming while everyone else took notes. He knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to work with his hands, work in construction, work with equipment. And everyone around him told him that wasn't a real career path. That wasn't where the money was. That kind of work was something you did when you had no other options, not something you planned for. So he tried to find a VOCHIC program. He looked into one in West Virginia, which made sense geographically. They told him no, he wasn't a West Virginia resident, so he didn't qualify. Fine. He looked into a similar program in Pennsylvania where he actually lived. They told him no too, because he'd attended high school in West Virginia. He didn't meet their requirements either. He'd fallen through a gap that existed purely because of where the state line ran near his house. Both doors closed because of a technicality that had nothing to do with his ability or his work ethic. He couldn't get into a vocational program in either state. What he did instead was enroll at the Community College of Allegheny County, where he found a welding department that was actually worth something. He got his certificate, walked out, and started figuring out the rest of it on his own. His first real job was with a landscaping company. And at first glance, that sounds like a step sideways from everything he'd wanted. But the company was expanding fast, getting into excavation work, and Matt found himself moving from building retaining walls to clearing house sites to eventually operating heavy equipment on the job. It was somewhere in that stretch of time that he bought his first piece of heavy machinery. He was still working for someone else, still on a paycheck, and he went out and bought a machine. That says a lot about where his head was already at. From there, he picked up pipeline work. Then he landed a position at a local machine shop. And by most people's measure, the machine shop job was the one he was supposed to stay at. 7 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. Good benefits, close to home. People in his life looked at that and said he'd found it. Steady work, reliable hours, the kind of job you hold on to. Matt had different ideas. Part of what drove him, and something he's talked about openly, was that he'd figured out something about himself by that point. He'd self-diagnosed with ADHD, not clinically, not through any formal process, just through years of watching how his own brain worked, how it would hyper-focus on the things that genuinely engaged him and completely switch off for everything else. The machine shop was fine, it just wasn't enough, and the gap between fine and enough was getting wider. What he needed was something he could build from the ground up, on his own terms, with no ceiling on what it could become. The idea of filming himself at work didn't come out of nowhere. Matt had actually had a YouTube channel for years before Diesel Creek ever existed. The early content was dirt bikes, a completely different world from where he'd eventually land. He started posting that stuff around 2011, made a few dollars a month from it. YouTube wasn't what it is today, and then went quiet in 2013. Life moved on, the jobs piled up, the channel sat dormant. What changed everything was stumbling onto Andrew Camerata's YouTube channel. Camerata, for anyone who doesn't know, is a solo creator in New York who films himself doing excavation work, property development, and equipment restoration. No crew, no production company, just a guy with a camera and a machine documenting the work. And something about watching that clicked for Matt in a way nothing else had. This wasn't entertainment exactly. It was just a man doing a job and people were watching by the millions. The question Matt started asking himself was obvious. He was doing the same kind of work. He had machines. He had projects. Why wasn't he filming this? In 2019, he relaunched his old channel under a new name, Diesel Creek, named after the actual creek that ran through the land he was working on. Not a brand, not a marketing decision, just a name that fit the place where everything was happening. The early content wasn't polished. It wasn't trying to be. What it was real. Matt had a way of walking viewers through whatever he was working on without talking down to them or turning it into a performance. He knew what he was doing, and it came across. The channel started picking up traction slowly through late 2019 and into early 2020, and then the world stopped. When COVID hit and most of the country locked down in early 2020, something unexpected happened to a very specific corner of YouTube. DIY content, hands-on restoration content, heavy equipment content, all of it surged. People stuck at home were watching things they'd never watched before. Algorithms started serving Diesel Creek videos to audiences who had never heard of it. The subscriber count started climbing in a way that would have been hard to predict even a few months earlier. Matt had already done the hard part. The channel existed, the content was there, the workflow was established. The pandemic didn't create Diesel Creek, it just threw a spotlight on something that was already worth watching. By the time restrictions started lifting and people went back to their routines, Diesel Creek had crossed a threshold it wasn't coming back from. The audience was real, the revenue was real, and the decision that had probably been sitting in the back of Matt's head for a while became a lot easier to make. He wasn't going back to the machine shop. He said in interviews that he never set out to build a business. He started monetizing the channel just to cover what it cost to make the videos, equipment, time, the whole operation. The money was never the point was being able to keep doing it. What he ended up building was something much bigger than that, but it didn't start from ambition. It started from practicality. If you've watched Diesel Creek with any regularity, you know the channel isn't just restoration videos with a guy talking over them. There's a whole world being built in the background, and that's where things get genuinely interesting. The homestead project is something Matt has been documenting for years now. He bought raw land, and he's been building everything from the ground up, not contracting it out, not bringing in professionals to do the hard parts, actually building it himself with the equipment he owns and the skills he's developed over a lifetime of figuring things out the hard way. The shipping container workshop is one of the more impressive parts of it. 2 containers, steel roof trusses, welded into a structure that now powers everything else happening on the property. Then there's Christine. Christine is a Galleon 5003 road grader that Matt picked up and attempted to restore. The name came from the Stephen King novel about a car that seemed to have a personality, and it fits. Over the course of the restoration, Christine found ways to fight back. Hydraulic failures, equipment behaving in ways it shouldn't, close calls that weren't particularly funny in the moment. Matt described the project at one point as a socially distanced restoration, just him and a machine that was actively trying to end him, with nobody else around. The machines themselves are a big part of what makes the channel work the way it does. Almost nothing Matt owns came to him in running condition. There's a crane truck he bought at auction for $700, with a seized engine he rebuilt in the woods. There's a wheel loader he calls Fat Alice, sourced from a junkyard, now used daily. A Komatsu excavator that's been on the channel for years. A 1957 autocar truck he's been bringing back to life. Each one of these machines has a story, And Matt has a way of telling those stories that makes them feel like characters rather than equipment. The abandoned church is probably the most ambitious thing he's taken on off-camera. He bought a church building in town with the long-term plan of gutting it and converting it into rental apartments. No timeline given, no contractor in the wings, just a project sitting there waiting for the right moment, which is exactly how everything else in Matt's world tends to work. What ties all of this together? The ADHD he's talked about, the way projects overlap and stack on top of each other, the fact that there's never a point where everything is finished and quiet, is that Matt seems to function best when there are 17 things happening simultaneously. A slower pace would probably break him. The channel reflects that. You're never watching someone coast. Here's where things stand as of early 2026. Diesel Creek is sitting at nearly 700,000 subscribers, with individual videos regularly pulling between 500,000 and 1 million views. His most recent uploads, from the first weeks of February, were getting the kind of numbers that most YouTube channels never see in their entire run. The 1960s military crane video from January 2026 hit close to 900,000 views. The Ritchie Brothers auction haul before that crossed 1 million. The revenue picture beyond ad money includes merchandise, brand sponsorships, and Amazon affiliate links, multiple streams running in parallel. He and Eva, who he married in October 2021, live in Burgettstown, Pennsylvania. She handles content creation behind the scenes and has from early on, even if she stays mostly out of frame. 3 dogs, a homestead that keeps growing, projects that keep stacking. There's no drama here, no falling out with a business partner, no channel strikes, no controversies, no period where things fell apart and had to be rebuilt. The people making those TikToks about his death and his disappearance were working with nothing. No source material, no incident, no story. Just a real channel that gets enough search traffic to be worth farming for clicks. What actually happened to Matt Stetar is this: a kid who fell through a gap in the educational system, who was told his interests weren't worth pursuing, who worked pipelines and landscaping and a machine shop that everyone said was good enough. That kid built something genuine on a piece of land near a creek in western Pennsylvania, and somewhere between 2019 and now, the rest of the world showed up to watch. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just doing the work. And for a channel that started with a few $100s in monthly ad revenue and a guy with a camera who wanted to cover his costs, Diesel Creek has become one of the most quietly impressive success stories on YouTube. Not because of viral moments or controversies or a dramatic arc, because the content is real, the knowledge is real, and the machines, even the ones trying to kill him, are absolutely real. The next time you see a TikTok claiming something terrible happened to Diesel Creek, remember that while those videos were being generated by an algorithm that had never seen a single episode, Matt was out in a field somewhere in Pennsylvania trying to get a 60-year-old military crane to turn over for the first time in decades. And knowing him, it probably ran.